The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. It's where we all begin. Welcome to Lazy Dog Typewriters.
The Royal Typewriter Company was created in 1904 in a machine shop in Brooklyn, New York. The company enjoyed rapid business success and developed a number of classic designs, including the Royal 10, which came out in 1914. Royal employed aggressive, innovative, and effective marketing from the get-go. To show how tough their typewriters were, Royal dropped thousands of typewriters in crates with parachutes from a Ford tri-motor airplane. Remarkably, only a few machines were damaged. During World War II, Royal shifted gears. To aid the U.S. war effort, they manufactured war material. In 1947, Royal produced a gold-plated version of its popular Quiet Deluxe. Ian Fleming, the British author who wrote the James Bond books, used one. The 1950s were boom times for typewriters, and Royal expanded overseas and merged with the McBee Corporation. Benetton Industries bought Royal as a corporate buying spree as they later gobbled up Triumph Adler. Little did Linton know they were buying at peak typewriter. This brings us to 1965 when this lovely Royal custom typewriter was made. In all metal construction, it was one of the last portable models made by Royal in the United States.
Howdy folks, and welcome to Lazy Dog Typewriters. We have Kevin and Katie and the rest of the Lazy Dog Typewriter crew with us here. And we want to take a look at this 1965 Royal Custom Typewriter. It's in mint condition, and let's take a look. First thing you notice is it's a two-tone typewriter with a not quite magenta red, more of a copperish red color to its overall casing. And one of the interesting things that I noticed when I look at this typewriter is it has a very aquatic look. It reminds me a lot of a manta ray, which may be just because my son Kevin is really into all kinds of aquatic life, and I tend to see that everywhere. Isn't that right, Kevin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. So one of the other things we notice about this typewriter is, unlike a lot of them, two things really. Unlike a lot of them from this vintage, this is one of the last all-metal construction typewriters made in the United States by Royal. And if you look carefully here, or zoom in, we can see that tag right here, Rugged Royal All Metal Structural Design on the tag, and they were really proud of that fact when they made this. So it gives it a really robust, solid feel to it, in comparison to a lot of the machines at the time were starting to be made in plastic. So back to the overall aspect. Two tones, very pretty white or very light cream color. We mentioned that this has a plastic, or it does have a plastic carriage return arm. And if those of you who've ever heard of the Royal Empress, or also the Royal Electress of that era, which were massive manual typewriters and electric typewriters respectively, designed to compete with the Selectric, you might recognize this plastic carriage return arm. In some of their ads, Royal mentioned that this was cool, was never going to be cold to the touch like the metal ones were, which is kind of funny. But at least on the Empress and the Electress rather, a lot of these plastic carriage return arms broke off because the carriage was simply so heavy. But that doesn't seem to be the case with these custom models.
It reminds me of Mars.
It does remind me of Mars. That's a great observation, Kevin. You can sort of see this being the color of the official typewriter of Mars if they had a chance, or a Mars rover. And that's funny because later on Royal went on to make a number of different astronaut-themed models. They have one called Astronaut. They have one called the Apollo, which we'll follow up in a later video. And so as I mentioned, this was a mid to late 60s model designed by Royal, one of the last ones they made in the United States, last all metal ones they made in the United States, before shifting production over to Europe, namely Netherlands. And this was because they had merged with the McBee Corporation to become the Royal McBee. And you can also, continuing on with some of the feature set of this machine, one thing that is very notable from this era is, and somewhat uncommon, is a dedicated #1 exclamation point key. And before that, the typewriters, many typewriters of this era didn't have a dedicated 1 key. And how did people write the letter 1, Kevin?
Lowercase l.
The lowercase l, that's right. So, and also to make an exclamation point, what would one have to do?
They would have to put the period, then backspace, then they would have to shift 8 key.
Shift, that's right, because over the 8 key is the apostrophe, and of course now it's the asterisk. And why that is the case is because the typewriter and the computer keyboards were different, and they weren't even standardized on the PCs until, gosh, I think even the early 80s. You can see some different things in the IBM models came out and pretty much standardized things at that time. In any case, so that's a dedicated one, which is a nice to have feature. And we'll spin right over here and see if we can see this, at least a better view of it. We'll have to move some shaky cam. But we have what's called the magic margin on the right side of the carriage and also on the left side of the carriage. And no hocus pocus was involved in this, but what the magic margins allowed a user to do was to simply set their margin on the typewriter by pressing, and you hear that little ratcheting noise, by sliding the typewriter wherever you wanted it to be, and then pressing this margin button, it would set your margin to that point. And it's a very simple and intuitive way to do it, but some folks get a little trouble. When you hit this, boom, you'll hear that little slick, and that means you just set the margin all the way on this, the right margin now set maybe 1/4 of an inch away from where your characters are, and that can be a bit of a hassle for you. So that's one thing to watch out for if you're getting one of these new typewriters, to make sure that the margins are set where you want them to be, magic or not magic. Okay, so that's one feature of this particular model. Another interesting feature is that Royal didn't have, they have tabs, but they don't call them tabs, they call them columns. So because of course that's what you're using your columns to do, or your tab to do, is to set columns. We have a magic column, everything is magical on the Royal, and then you have your column clear button over here. So this is essentially your tab button for setting your tabs and your column clear as well. So, and then if you want to actually, so setting them and then clearing them, and then your tab button, aka column button, is right over here, and you would just press that and you can go to wherever your column was set. So as you can see, they're pretty much almost always set, when people set them, to the center of the platen and in about 10 character increments. So in the early days of typewriters, as you probably know, they had manual tabs which would be set on the back of the carriage, and you had little slots and things that look like paper clips. On the Royal Model 10, which we also own, this area would be exposed, there would be a whole bunch of slots, and you would slide 1, 2, or 3, or however many of those, quote, paper clips that you had, that you wish to set your tabs, and that would manually set your tabs. And since tabs don't really change that much, it's not a huge difference, but Royal was quite proud of its columns. Another thing they were really quite proud of is their magic margin system, which we've gone over. And in fact, they had a pretty extensive lawsuit against, I think, also Smith Corona and Remington, and forced Remington to give up its implementation of their own magic margins. That's what's on the KMC system, and Royal successfully won a lawsuit which took many years to get them to stop infringing on that technology. All right, so less legal and more typing. One of the things we have on this on the left-hand side is the touch control, and what does that do, Kevin?
It gets rid of the intensity of it.
Yeah, it gets rid of the intensity, or it gives you the intensity from low, medium, and high, and all that really does is adjust the strength of a spring setting, and it changes the feel of your typing, of the touch of the machine. I would say overall in this machine it has a very similar feel to a Smith Corona of that era, maybe a little bit softer. It's not quite so crisp as some of your Olympias or others, but overall it's a very nice machine, a very good design. If you're a better touch typist than I am, you would probably leave it in the light setting. As I am sort of more of a hunt and peck typer, I tend to have it in more of a firmer setting that works better for me, and I tend to leave it in the high or the medium setting. Also over here on the right we have something called Twin Pack. What's Twin Pack and RBS stand for, Kevin?
So the RBS system, that is red, that's black, that's stencil.
That's right. So that's your ribbon colors. As we can see, you have red and black, or black and then red. It's interesting that the R is above, but the R stands for red, and that means actually really the lower half of your ribbon. So you have a ribbon color selector. Whatever ribbon you actually have, green and black, blue and red, it doesn't matter. It's not, of course, tied to that, but it'll position type on the upper or lower position of the ribbon, and it's just weird that the red is almost always placed in the lower position, but here it is above. I've never understood why the color sequence is the way it is. Now the Twin Pack I'm not as familiar with. It is, looks like it's trademarked, but I think that has to do with their own special spools of ribbon that that Royal would sell, and I think they even had their own subsidiary specifically focused on creating disposable things like ribbon and whatnot. Okay, moving on to other features. On the left hand of the carriage we have our line select, as Katie is helpfully pointing out, and that's got a 1 and a line and a 2, and if we move that lever, Katie, can you move that lever? Yeah, that's the carriage return, but on this lever right here, this is our line select, and we can switch between 1, 1.5, and 2, and that of course controls how many lines are advanced as we move the carriage return. Now up here we have our paper alignment guide, which you can use to change based on the size of the paper you have. Thank you, Katie. If we have some narrow paper, we can slide it over to the right. And then you would, of course, set your magic margin very quickly and easily to the safe spacing that you need. Let's take a look at the ribbons. This nice metal selector cover comes right off. And here we have what looks to be a very clean, was not always very clean segment. This is a basket shift. So the carriage itself doesn't move, but the basket or segment moves, and that is generally a much easier and lighter shift selection that helps you really it helps you not have to press so hard with your pinkies as the earlier carriage selectors do. And most of these typewriters by this era had all shifted to the segment shift, and except for Olympia, which was a really long holdout, this was the case. All right, let's give this one a shot and see how it runs. We'll just slide some paper in. Now, the comment on platens. This platen is actually fairly soft. Some of the platens you find are rock hard. Is that right, Kevin? Rock hards. You can bounce.
As a rock.
Yeah, you can break diamonds on them. But this one's actually pretty nice. One of the ways you treat that, as Katie is showing you with her super tough finger, is to use 2 sheets of paper. So we're just going to load up one, but if you're new to typewriters and you're wondering why is it quite so loud, or I'm having problems with my impressions, the lines are smudging, or the characters don't look as good as you think they should, one of the things you can check is the platen. And if you have a really hard platen, taking 2 sheets of paper and rolling them both in at the same time can help. Okay, let's get this show on the road, load up some paper. Go ahead, Katie, help us out. Alright, so there we go. We've loaded our paper up. Now, one of the things to mention on the controls here, if you had not been able to load the paper squarely, you can press this lever here on the right, which I'm not sure you can see. Let's get that in focus. There we go. So right here on the right, it seemed on these Royals, these seem very lightweight, but this is your paper tension release. And then you can actually slide your paper if it wasn't straight. A classic way of fixing alignment issues is to square up your paper right by the corners like we've done here, and then just set. There we go. And Katie, go ahead and roll that back down. We'll start writing at the top of the page. Go the other way. This way, hon. There you go. All right, we'll be set up. We'll get our best typer in the house, Mrs. Lazy Dog Typewriter. All right, let's see how it types. Alright, let's check the on-feet alignment, and we'll have that done by typing a series of capital letters and lowercase letters. What's the first letter we're going to type, Katie?
Capital.
And what's the next letter, Kevin?
Lowercase.
Here we go. Alright, assistant, that looks good. Let's roll these up and just take a look at the alignment. So there's ever so slightly, a very slight misalignment with the lowercase h and the capital H, but it's so slight I don't want to try to chase it down and make it worse. So we're going to leave it right there and call it close enough for government work. I wanted to say a few words about the case for this typewriter, this Royal typewriter. Before I do, you may see that there is a luggage tag. Can I tag along with Southwest Airlines? And that's because this is the first typewriter I have ever flown with. And boy, are my arms tired. No, I have purchased this in San Diego at the suggestion of my sister who lives out there, and flew back. And many times it comes up in the forums about, well, can you carry a typewriter on? And the answer is absolutely you can, even on Southwest. You just got to get the line early. In any case, this is the case. And these were not manufactured by Samsonite. I'm not sure who made them. They have, it gets the job done, but if I had to list another con, that would be the case, because these case walls are plastic and not the aluminum that the Smith Corona models of that similar era had, and those are much more robust. These are just not quite as strong. They definitely do the job of keeping it dust-free and will shield against minor impacts. You've got a nice metal rim, a very simple latch mechanism, and you have very sturdy locking mechanisms in here to keep your typewriter secure once they're in. But this material just is not as robust as the Samsonite made. So to sum up our assessment of this Royal custom typewriter, we really like it. Here are some of the pros and cons. Well, the first pro is it's really just gorgeous. It's a gorgeous red Martian rover color. It really stands out, a coppery red, beautiful sunset. And kind of ironically, since we're talking about a dry, dusty, barren planet, we also really like its aquatic lines. It reminds us of a manta ray, sort of a mouth scoop swooping along, if you'll go bear with us. We think it's a really feature-rich machine. It's got a dedicated one key, it's got columns, touch control, ribbon color selector, and of course the magic margins, which are very intuitive once you understand how to use them, and really help you quickly set your margins without having to either use the old-fashioned pens in the back or other less elegant solutions. It's got all metal construction, which is a very nice thing to have. It gives us a very solid, rugged, dependable, and just all-around tough impression. It has excellent consistent touch. And if we had to find a con, it might be that it is not it's not a snappy typer. The touch is firm, is consistent and smooth, but it might be a little bit soft, especially if you are a much more rapid typer than any of the Lazy Dog typewriters are, typewriter typers. And other than that, we really enjoy this machine, and we think it's a fabulous example of some of the best American-made technology from the mid-60s. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon. It really is almost too hard to believe, but Royal actually did drop a ton, no pun intended, of typewriters from the cargo door of a Ford tri-motor airplane in the 1920s, 1927. And we here at Lazy Dog Typewriter have miraculously been able to recover some actual in-flight video of these airdrops, which we hope you will enjoy watching. Stay tuned. Ready to drop the typewriter? Let it go.
Oh, I got a win.
I got it!